Hey there, hope you're doing well. Welcome to Snowpal Software Development and Architecture Podcast Metadata. This is 2 of 2 in this series. If you haven't checked the previous one, just definitely give it a listen or watch it because we talked about what we typically cover in our podcast, the topics, the categories, the platforms we publish to, and a lot of those initial introduction. I will not repeat those details here because you can definitely check out the first video and then watch this one. In this one, we'll pick up from where we left off there. So let me do a screen share so you can see the diagram that we quickly drew up that talked about the different the categories, the items that we talk about in the podcast, the topics that we tend to cover, the solo, the collaborative podcast, the Snowpal updates, and all of those things. Now let's actually go look at some of the podcasts and go into each of these categories. So the platform, there's many different platforms, but we're going to look at Apple and Spotify. So to go to Apple, you just go to apple.snowpal.com, have it redirect you to the podcast, and you can just go browse it, check out the podcast. You can listen to it on the browser, or if you're an iPhone user or an Apple user, you can listen or watch these podcasts on your Apple devices as well. For Spotify, you can just go to spotify.snowpal.com and have it redirect you directly to our I know why that took a second. So it will redirect you to Spotify, and you can go to watch this on either the web or your app as well if you're a Spotify user. So that's where the platforms are. Let's actually go check out. I'm going to close one of these windows here. Let me make sure I'm actually it's recording it. So let's look at the first category, which is the software development and architecture. What are the kind of podcasts that are generally there? So let me go here. And let's say if you go to search, if you do it on the phone, they have actually an easier search interface. I believe most folks probably are watching this or listening to it on the phone. So it's even easier to search for items within a podcast. On the web, I don't think they have that feature to search. So you can just do a Snowpal. And then I'm going to say, Flutter. Just pick one of the frameworks. Let's go to... Right, so this one took me to one of the podcasts. Maybe I thought it'll actually show podcast and shows, Snowpal. Yep, so if you do Snowpal Flutter, you see all of the tech podcasts related because our mobile apps are built using Flutter. We are a polyglot ecosystem. We have many different languages and frameworks, starting with the most recent APIs, a number of them being built on Golang, to APIs built on other languages, to our web app, using a combination of single page app technologies, to our mobile app, using Flutter amongst other things. So if you have an interest in Flutter, which is an awesome framework for building web apps and mobile apps, especially mobile, we have our preferences for web. We tend to use React. We rely on that. But for mobile, we like Flutter. So there's articles that we share about, our experiences with Flutter, design patterns that we've created, caching strategies we've implemented, and we've sort of shared and socialized with a larger community out there. Caching that has actually worked quite seamlessly for us, our own design patterns built in-house. So you can look at that as one item, Flutter. So let's say I do Snowpal AWS. Let's see what it pulls up. It pulls up a few courses as well, which again goes into this third category of education platform. You can go, it has a 1 minute, it's like 1 minute or 40 seconds. It gives you a quick introduction to the courses. You can go check out the courses and see if that's actually something you're interested in learning. And then if you are, it costs you like literally $5, maybe less or maybe a little bit more. It's very affordable. And it's about the courses range anywhere from 30-40 minutes to close to 2 hours in some cases, and you'll have a good sense, a hands-on sense of what actually transpires during that particular course session. Or there's a number of free podcasts as well. This is AWS Lambda and Layers. If you're using AWS Lambda and also using Layers, this might be interesting to you because there's certain dependency complications and complexities and how you can actually get past those. Publishing APIs on AWS, we published a big series of podcasts. This one, we went to an AWS summit, my coworker and I, not too long ago. Towards the latter part of last year in DC, and shared our opinions about the workshops and sessions that we were able to attend. We talk about certifications. There's more course-related podcasts showing up here, and so on and so forth. Let's search for something else. I don't know. Let's say Snowpal Ruby, for instance, because we do a fair bit of Ruby work as well. So this one is a course podcast that talks about how to implement web services in Ruby. Similarly, if you do, Golang, it should pull up a podcast. Again, if you do it on the phone, you can search within the podcast. It's much easier. You don't have to go across and search with a prefix. So there is a course on web services in Golang, for instance. Those are like tech podcasts, but there's like any number of them. So if I actually remove, just go to the podcast itself and scroll down, you'll see that, it's got good titles, description, transcripts, everything else you can come to expect from a very professional podcasting platform. And if you're interested in, like, say, cloud, you can just do Snow Cloud. And I think we did a number of recent podcasts on Confluent Cloud. We check out other products and assess them and see how they fit into our ecosystem, whether they can help us, and whether or not we're using it. We socialize our learnings with you. So you see some of them run into, an hour and 30 minutes of content. This is showing examples of how you can use a Go client to publish messages. So that gives you an idea. It's very hands-on. It's hardly any theory. Probably there is none in most cases. If you want to learn about Heroku, there's if you're a DevOps person or a platform engineering person who's interested in Kubernetes and Docker and Heroku, we have some podcasts, and we're going to have more in those areas. So we've covered sort of the updates a little bit, and then the development podcast. Let's talk a little bit about the collaborative podcast as well. So the collaborative podcast, to search for them, again, when you do it on the phone, like I said, you can go into the podcast for Snowpal, and then you can look at it. It's super easy to search within the podcast. For some reason, can't seem to find it on the web on Spotify. So Snowpal, you can I'm going to type featuring, because that we usually say featuring who the guest is. You can see here Automated Economy and its Influence in India's Growth, one of the most recent podcasts with Kramer of Cooperative Computing. It was a brilliant podcast that I thoroughly enjoyed, so definitely check that one out. We had special guests on our podcast. You can check, we talked about pros and cons of technology choices. This is with Professor Dr. Rangarajan about the fundamentals of sales. There's more, but these are tech topics. Some, majority of them are hands-on, but some technical, but without necessarily a screen share. This one might be one of them, testing APIs on Postman. Had a conversation with Tracy Reagan of Deploy Hub recently about software supply chain security and a decoupled architecture. This one is with Megili Pelicio, who's an author. We talked about her book, Future Proofing Product Management. This one is the World Traveler series with Prasanna. And then, there's a number of other podcasts, so look for, go into the podcast, go into Snow Podcast on your Apple devices or Spotify app, and you'll see a number of other collaborations there. So that gives you hopefully some idea. At this point, maybe I can sort of stop the screen share.